sound speeds. And if you ever use audio compression for your podcasts or your personal video projects, then you're going to want to pay close attention to this video because I'm going to be going over something that you might not understand about audio compression and something that you should know if you ever want to use audio compression at all. Let me start by answering the question of what is audio compression. Imagine you're doing a recording. The loudest yells are this volume, and the quietest whispers are this volume. If you don't want your audience to constantly have to ride the volume knob, then you're going to want to even those out a little bit to make the listening experience better for the audience member. And the way you do this is by setting an audio level threshold. That is, anything louder than this level is going to be squashed down to that level. And let's say that there's 10 dB above your audio level threshold, and you're going to be squashing anything that's within that 10 dB down to that level. Now, that means that your quieter volumes are here and they're not quite as far away from where the peaks used to be. But then because you've now reduced it by 10 dB, you have to bring the project back up 10 dB. And in doing so, a couple of things happen that you're going to want to pay attention to. For this video, we're going to be going into candid mode, and I'm going to be sitting at my computer with Photoshop open, explaining to you some visuals that are going to help you imagine the auditory. Hopefully that makes sense. Now in front of me, we have a sine wave, and this is representing a sound wave. Just one. There's the crest and there is the trough. And if you can imagine that the rules that apply to the crest also applies the same to the trough, we don't need to do it to both. We're going to simply use just the crest for our demonstration today. Now, if you can imagine, the louder your volume is that you're recording is going to go higher in a crest. So the louder it is, the higher the peaks go there. Now we're going to blow this up and look right here. Now, if you can imagine, the 0 dB line is 0 dB, meaning it's like quiet. But 20 dB would be like the volume in a recording studio. And the quietest part of your house might be 30 dB. Your talking voice might be 60 or 50 dB. And if you're talking about the city streets that you might live in a big city area, that might be around 80 or 90 dB. Concerts could be upward of 110 or 120 dB. Very loud and damaging. Jet engines, maybe 140. Rifles and big shotguns and stuff, upwards of 160 dB. Now, in this particular circumstance here, you got to imagine that every single bit in like a 16-bit recording or a 24-bit recording corresponds to about 6 dB in volume. It's actually 6.02, but we're going to go ahead and call it 6. So if this is our 0 dB mark right here, this is 6 dB, this is 12, 18, 24, all the way up. Now, this is a very loud peak, but it's going to help us visualize pretty well. Now, remember when I said that we basically record with our audio peaks around maybe a negative 12 dB? That's the reason why I'm not going all the way up here to the very, very tip top, which would be 144 dB of dynamic range for a 24-bit audio recording or 96 dB for a 16-bit recording. Now, I'm starting to get a little bit ahead of myself, so let me ring myself back in. Right here is a little bit of headroom, 12 dB to be exact. That's why our peaks are at negative 12 dB. Now down here at the very bottom, we have 0 dB, but then wait a minute, we have a self noise on our microphone that brings it up to maybe negative 12 dB. So if you can imagine, our self noise is here, and the rest of this is signal. So signal to noise ratio. We're talking about, in the case of a 24-bit audio recording, we're talking about 6 dB, 12 dB, 18, 24, all the way up to 144, we're talking about a 12-to-1 signal to noise ratio. That's pretty good. There's a lot of signal here for this little amount of noise. But when you start doing compression, then what that does is it kind of makes a couple of little interesting things happen here. I'm going to show you this by expanding out just a wee bit here. Now, this is the same exact thing. All I've done is now extended it out the bottom. Now, when you are doing audio compression, what you're essentially doing is bring up your noise floor. And notice that my peaks are still the exact same. It's just that the amplitude is not nearly as high. Time-wise, from left to right is still the exact same. But the peaks are no longer as high. But notice also that my volume, or my noise floor, is actually coming up. And when that happens, no longer is this 6, 12, this is now 18, 24, 30, 36, 42, 48 dB of noise right now. And now my total noise to signal to noise ratio is a lot lower than it once was. So now almost a third of my recording is now noise. As you're doing your audio processing, you may look at your noise floor and say, oh, I can completely gate that out. That's eliminating it altogether. So signal to noise ratio is no longer going to be an issue if I apply heavy compression, right? Wrong. And the reason why is because if you could imagine your loudest volumes here and your quietest volumes here, and there's only a difference of maybe 24 dB, remember 1 bit corresponds to 6 dB. 24 bits is now 4 bits of information. You have taken your 24-bit recording and reduced it to basically 4 bits of actual information. The quality of your recording is now going to stink. And it's no longer going to sound good at all. You may not have noise in your recording anymore, but it's not going to sound good. So you don't want to overdo your audio compression. Even if you can eliminate the whole noise floor raising thing, you don't want to do that. That's sound advice. Have a question you'd like answered or want to add something? Be sure to write it in the comment section down below. You can also make a suggestion for future topics of discussion. Again, comment section down below, or you can email me at soundspeeds@yahoo.com. Be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you won't miss out on future sound advice.